studies that there was a beautiful service that was offered in my research institute, and many other places are now offering comparable services, and it's basically career services. And these are the people who really help you to make this transition. So today I'm really happy to be discussing that with Marion Gürth. Marion is from the Career Services and the German Cancer Research Center in Heidelberg. So they made this beautiful department that really helped grad students and postdoc to make the transitions between early stages of their career towards later stages. So we're really looking forward to Marion to discuss with us her tips and advice and how to prepare ourselves for a job in science and how to make these transitions as smooth and as easy as we can. Thank you, Marion, for being with us, and we are really looking forward for a great talk from you.
Indeed. And the floor is yours, so we will log off with that. Thank you.
So thank you very much for inviting me. It's really great to be part of this. So I really enjoy doing this here. And I will say a few words about the career service in a few minutes. And so I have a technical question for the very beginning, just to quickly clarify. So how do I change the slides here?
You can change it using the arrow keys. You could also change it with your mouse. And actually also, if you look under the slides, you can activate a cursor by clicking on the pointer that's under the slides. Or you could even draw on the slides or whatever.
Okay, so actually it doesn't work for me, sorry.
No. Oh, yeah,
but I can click on the slide, so yeah. It works. If I click on the slides, that works. Perfect. So thanks a lot. So when you approached me, you actually sent me an email and I was asking, okay, what should be covered in this talk and what would you be specifically interested in? And so Bola sent me an email saying, so we were thinking of a 30 to 40-minute talk on how to prepare myself for a job in science. And this would include CV and cover letter writing and preparation for a job interview. And I thought a bit about that and thought, okay, so CV and cover letter writing, so you could at least talk hours only about that topic even. But you already said something very important because you say there's so many things changing in the life of a scientist today. And it's like transition to different positions, transition to different countries. And there's much more behind than just applying for new positions and having the perfect CV. And this is why I thought there are more important things that have to happen before. And so what can you actually do? So which options do you have and what do you actually want to do? And this is something I also want to include in this talk here today. So, and it brought me to a structure where I said, okay, the first thing we should actually talk about is career planning. So how can I really prepare for making those transitions that you already mentioned kind of happening smoothly? And this has a lot to do with your skills, your interests, and the options you have, of course, and the things you want to do. And one major part of this career planning is actually networking and to really build up your professional network that will be very supportive in your further procedure of your career. But as you wished for that, I will also talk a bit about those application skills, but let's say at the very end, and we'll present some of do's and don'ts that you have to have in mind for writing a CV, cover letter, and at least also for doing a job interview. So to say a few words about myself, so why is it me here talking today? So Bola just mentioned, so he was here at the DKFZ, so he's an alumnus, and he enjoyed the career service, which I really love to hear. And so what are we doing? So I myself, I'm a professional careers advisor. I have a background in molecular biology, and I got into this position after spending some time in research, mainly cancer research, but realizing that I love science and I love research, but I didn't want to be an active part of it anymore. So I didn't want to do science, but I was looking for something closely related and where I can bring in other skills that I have. And this is how I ended up at the career service, actually starting as a project coordinator, and by taking additional training, became a careers advisor. And what do we do actually at the career service? So our aim is to really support all major students, all doctoral researchers, all postdocs in taking the next step and to really enable them to take informed decisions. And we do that by doing one-to-one career guidance, giving career advice, and also providing a lot of information, as well as organizing different trainings and provide also people the opportunity to benefit from the network that is already existing. So from our alumni network mainly. And this is really, people come and approach us with all different kinds of questions, be it from I have no idea where I want to go, to very precise questions and say, this is the position I want to apply for, this is the lab I want to go for my postdoc. Can we please check my application? Can we prepare for the interview? And things like this. So where do I work? So Bola quickly introduced it. It's the German Cancer Research Center in Germany, obviously, as the name says. And we are the biggest biomedical research center in Germany with more than 3,000 people working here. It's roughly 50% scientists, and we have a large group of doctoral researchers. It's around 400 doctoral researchers and roughly 350 postdocs. And this is actually natural that not all of the people coming here doing their PhD, doing their postdoc will stay. And therefore, the next step is always very present in a way. And we try to support them all in doing this on a well-informed basis, actually. Yeah, so to quickly get back to the structure, so the career planning part, actually. So how do you do that? So how do you find your way? So you come to a certain point where you say, okay, the next step is somehow ahead and I do have different options, but how do I then really decide on which option to take? And what is actually the basis for my decision here? And 3 things you should think about is actually, what are you good at? So these are all the hard skill facts. So these are your scientific skills, your writing skills, so everything that you actually learn. And then it's about what you love. So these are the things that you really enjoy doing. So if you think of a typical day at work, so what are the things that you really like? Is it, for example, more the real planning of experiments, or is it maybe more the hands-on things that you enjoy doing? And in the very end, so you also have to live from the work you do. So you also have to think a bit, okay, what pays well, or what's actually really an option there. And the ideal case is really that you find like this winning spot where you have the overlap of all the things that you do, because the other things that could happen, you can see that in the slide. You could be happy but poor, or rich but bored. And or you can really say what you love and what is really possible to earn a lot of money with is just a dream. So you have to think about all these elements and have to be aware of that. And being aware of that is like the first step in career planning, actually. So how to find options? So there are many options in science, and there are many doors that you can really go through. And these doors might have labels, they might have signs, but even then, if you see the labels on the different doors, you might not be really sure what's behind that door. And therefore, it's important that you do a lot of research on these different options. So how can you do that? So it's like, how do you find out more about things you're interested in? So of course, it's a lot of reading. You can read books, you can research online, you can read job advertisements. But what we think is the most important thing to do is to really talk to people who are doing this work. So who are in positions that might be interesting for you. And so where do you start? And the most obvious thing is really to start with alumni. And this is actually why also we are responsible for alumni relations at the same time as being the career service, because so our alumni are kind of role models, and proceeding their careers and following up on their careers, we can really see what are possible options for people to go. And that's just a brief insight on where DKFZ alumni are now. So we just did a lot of research and surveys to figure out what are typical fields people are really going into. And you can see that reads from academic research via more approached things to entrepreneurship, marketing and sales. And this is really, of course, not a full list of options that you do have, but it might be just a nice place to start to think about, okay, might this be something that I would be interested in? When people come and approach us, so some of them really wish to get like the magic formula for their dream job. So we can't give that, of course, and it might be too easy also, because so it's not like people would then be responsible for themselves, but we really encourage them to be themselves in the driver's seat, and they have to decide and they have to do the decisions, and we can't do that for anyone. But we can support, of course, in asking the right questions and providing them some help on how to really think about the important things that they have to think about. So we say, in the end, it's not about having a clear plan. So to have like a real career development plan that is written down and that you have to strictly follow, because that might not be the way that will make you happy, but it's about that process of planning. So to really think about those things and to also note them down, and of course to always revise them, but to at least start thinking about it and do that in a structured way, because you always have those questions in mind, and it's somewhere, and as Bula said at the very beginning, so you're busy in the lab, you're busy with your studies, you're busy with anything. But if you really take the time and really take this time to structurally think about that, it's really very useful. So to sit down, think about it, note that down. And so this is just like, take the time to really do it and not only think about it somewhere in your head. So it's about skills, interests, and values. So the skills, the things that you really are able to do, interests, the things you like, and values is much a broader thing, so that goes in the direction of which kind of environment do you need for your work. So do you need many people around you? So who are the kind of people you want to work with? Are you happy in a smaller university, or do you really enjoy being a part of a large company, let's say? So these are the things that are important to you, and that you also have to consider. And they're very important, because you can find a perfect match for your skills and interests. If that doesn't go with your values in a way, this is really not helpful, and you won't be happy in that position. So it's talking to people, so the networking part, and I will tell you a bit more, and also on how to do that in a few minutes. And to set yourself SMART goals. So this is really helpful, to not say, okay, this is the option. I might be super interested in scientific writing, and yeah, but for that, actually, I've never been part of writing a grant, for example, but I have to improve that someday in a way. So if you really see there's something that you could also develop, try to make that SMART. So SMART goals, it's for S, specific, M, measurable, A, active, R is realistic, and T is time bound. So that you say, okay, if I have to improve my writing skills, for example, and to do that, I will have a very specific thing, because I will contribute to that grant that we're writing anyhow. Is it measurable? Of course, it's measurable, because in the end, you can say whether you did it or not. Active, so you have to do something for it. Realistic is the part where you say, okay, can I actually invest the time? So do I have enough time for that? Okay. And time bound, let's say I will do that by the end of May or so. So this is how you can set yourself like little goals that you can approach directly, but it brings you to the final goal in the end. So a very useful tool to do that and to create your own individual development plan is a tool that is provided by Science Careers. And those of you who are in the US, they might have heard of it. So it's a free online tool, so you can just access it. And there you can do a self-assessment on your skills as well as on your interests and your values. And by doing this self-assessment, this will be matched to data from people in different positions, and you will get out a list with 20 different options that might be interesting positions and fields for you. And this is just a nice starting point. Of course, this is also not a list where you say, okay, I have to do the thing that's on the very top, but it might be that there are things coming up that you've never thought about. And this is just interesting to see and to learn a bit more about that, and to really say, okay, maybe you then decide for 2 or 3 options, and then you can really put yourself a little plan with smart goals and to really proceed and go on with that plan. So, and what we say, it's the planning and not having the plan. So that means you do that at some point, but you will always have to revise that. So you actually start with considering different options. So what is actually your goal, your objectives, and what's important to you. Then you think about your competencies and also your personality. So that's about the values and wishes. And this is kind of your building material. So everything, all the options will be built on this. And then it's about collecting options. And that means you have to collect all kinds of options that might be interesting. And you can be very open here, and you can always narrow that down at a later point. And you have to really try to do some kind of reality check. So ideally, if you have the chance to try out those options yourself, so if you have the chance to go to a specific country, for example, for some time, because you want to just feel how it would be to live there, or if you have the chance to do an internship somewhere to just figure out, is this something I would like? That's always ideal, because only then you can actually really judge on whether this is an option for you. And if you can't do that yourself, then try to get the closest you can. And this is what I just mentioned. So talk to people who are in these positions. And then you can implement your plan step by step. And at some point, you might have to revise it. So to say, okay, actually, I learned this option was interesting for me at the very beginning, but I just realized actually that doesn't fit, and I really want to go another way. And so this is a constant process, but it helps you to always question things and to really think whether this is something for you or not. And what is really helpful with that is that you have a mindset that gets a bit away from failure, for example. So get rid of that term and say, okay, this is just experience. So and that sometimes just happens. People come here and they start their PhD, and at some point they realize, okay, actually, this is not what I expected it to be. And I really don't see me doing this, and I really want to do something else. And then it's really not to consider this as failure. It's just you learned, okay, maybe this is just not the option for me. And I stumbled into something that I haven't thought about before, maybe properly enough, or I just realized it while doing it, and then it's just experience. So get rid of that term failure. As I just mentioned, so it's not a linear thing, so you will always have to revise your planning in a way, and you should try to gather first-hand experience, and it's very, very useful to visualize that. So this is what I mentioned, when you always have that in mind and it's somewhere in the background and you think about it, that doesn't get you further. But if you really sit down and take some notes and say, okay, this is where I want to go, these are the steps I have to take, this is super helpful. And yeah, stay curious and always optimistic and positive. So it's really to be open here, because you can follow that plan and it seems to be perfect, but don't get blind, because very often just options pop up on the side. And so it's really important to be aware of that, so that you don't miss things also that happen right next to your plan. And you're not alone. I think that's a very important thing. And Ola mentioned the career service. And even if you don't have a career service at your institution, that's not super bad, because you can find supporters anywhere. And we always recommend also people to really talk also, of course, to their PIs, and but also to their colleagues and friends. And it's just that we realized it's very cool if you have like different personalities within your supporter team, I would call it. So the people who really, really know you by heart, like your closest friends and family, so who are very empathetic. And those are the ones who say, hey, actually, you never wanted to do like this, or for years you dreamed of something completely different. You need creative people there, so people who are really very, very open, kind of crazy thinkers, and really thinking about different options. But also people who really then bring your plans into action, so who really remind you that you don't get lost in dreams and only collect ideas, but never follow up on any of those. And what's also very helpful if you have somebody who is kind of a tough reviewer. So somebody who says, okay, no, that will not work out because of this and that. So those are the people who might tell you things that you don't want to hear, but it's very important to also have them, so to really support you in a way. Yeah, so where do you find those people? So actually, it's easy to find them in your family, with your friends. But it's more than that. So because those people can also be mentors for you, and it might be even people that you don't even know at the moment. And this brings us actually to the next part of this talk, because I wanted to say a few words about networking. And if you talk to people, so at different occasions, be it at a conference or be it somewhere else, you actually always have to start with introducing yourself. And so this is one of the major elements actually of networking, is to present yourself. And you might have heard something about elevator pitches. So the term comes actually from the idea that you go to a building and you enter the elevator on ground floor and you meet somebody, you really like that person and you know that person, and you are in the situation that you say, oh, okay, now I have to say something about myself so that this person might remember me at some point. And the time you have is just as the elevator goes up to the 8th floor. And this is the time you have to say something meaningful to introduce yourself, and in a way that that person keeps you in mind. And so this is kind of a tough thing, and you really have to practice that. And it's really about summarizing your biography and your ambition in a very short thing that is less than 60 seconds, and you can say roughly 150 to 200 words. And this is your personal commercial. And of course, this is not that you do that like once and then you learn it and then you have it for all the time. So you always have to tailor it a bit to your needs as well, to the audience actually. So you will introduce yourself to another group of master students different than you would introduce yourself towards a PI, for example. And this is something where but you can practice that. And this is really something very useful. So because very often you are in the situation where you say, oh, who are you and what you're doing? And this is actually then something that can be prepared and has to come naturally in a way. But you can really prepare for that. And especially if you want to really reach something with it. And yeah, presenting yourself usually is something that you have to do at the very beginning of a conversation. And that brings me to something else, and this is the so-called serial position effect. And actually, this is that people, so they figured it out by letting people remember simple lists for grocery shopping. And they realized that people had the tendency to remember always the things that came at the very beginning. And it's the same for giving talks. It's the same for saying anything, because after a while, it's just that really people don't listen enough anymore. But what they will always recall is those things that are said at the very, very beginning. And this is what you have to have in mind. That's valid for the elevator pitch. That's valid for giving a talk. But this is also valid for actually writing CVs and cover letters, and as well as for your LinkedIn profile. So it's really, so the things that are on the top are the things that are really be remembered then in the end. So a very general principle, but useful for all different kind of things. So those networking questions that people usually have, it's like very, very often you feel like, oh, okay, I have to do networking, but maybe you're more a shy person and don't really like it. But this is actually a learnable skill. And I think this is very important to know that you can learn networking. And it's just that you have to practice a bit and always think what's the worst thing that could happen. And actually, the worst thing that could happen is usually that a person might not get back to you, or that a person might not reply or whatever. But there's actually nothing super bad to lose. And this is really something you definitely should try out, because a professional network will be very, very helpful for you in finding also your different options and in taking the next steps. So you can find contacts almost anywhere. So at conferences, at all different kinds of events, career fairs, as well as in social media. So you can really, if you have a profile on LinkedIn, for example, you can browse profiles and find interesting people. And if you want to get in touch because you have a certain question, or you want to know what they actually do because you see the profile is interesting, this person does, for example, a postdoc at an interesting institute, and you would really love to talk to that person because you want to know what it's all about. And then it's important that you really, before you get in touch, that you actually prepare yourself. So really learn about who's that person, where is she or he working at, so what's the job title. Maybe you can learn about, I don't know, publications or something like that. And then you can in touch, and you can do something what we call informational interviewing. And it's called interviewing, but in that case, it's not like a job interview. So it's not you being the person being interviewed, but you are the interviewer. And you're looking for information. So this is why it's called informational interviewing. And you can stay super calm there because there's nothing to lose. So you're only looking for information. But talking to people in interesting positions might be very, very helpful for you. And we say there's just like 5 basic questions so to ask to these people. And so what's important maybe to know is, so that only works really in a personal conversation. So you can't do that by email or on LinkedIn, let's say. So you either have to meet the person, but this is of course not possible all the time. But you can, of course, also phone that person. And in a personal conversation, that works very well. So to really ask what they do, to learn a bit more about what's behind that, how the person got there, which is very important because you can also see what was important to end up in this position. So which kind of additional training maybe was useful, and at least also to learn about the application process. So how did the person get there? And you can ask about the positive things. So what does the person like about that position? And as well about the things that might be negative or could be changed. And this is just the personal impression that you get then. So you can talk, for example, to 8 people working in very similar positions, but some of them might find things positive, the others not. And for you, again, it's a totally different thing, but you can decide on that and say, oh, okay, I can really imagine doing something very similar, or say, oh, maybe that's not for me. And the most important and last question is actually, who else can I talk to? So this is where you can really spread your network and really find also people where you can also approach them and talk to them. Yeah. So, and this informational interviewing then at least brings me to the last part of that talk, and this is about at least the way of ending up in a job interview, and leads me to this application skills. And I think the most important thing, and I hope you all know that great song from Metallica, is to understand what matters. So really imagine you are the recruiter. So this is the most important thing to have in mind when applying for jobs and positions. So understand what's really mattering here, because nothing else matters, right? So think about who would you recruit yourself. So this is just a general thing. To understand job advertisements, it's really important to take that step back and to say, okay, why are they at least recruiting? Is there someone leaving? Is there a new position? Maybe there's additional funding. And why are they looking for somebody? Maybe they are lacking of an expert. Are they looking for a real expert in a certain field? Or is there just an immense workload and they just need some kind of support? And those are questions that you can really ask yourself and try to answer them. And if you would be the recruiter, so how would you actually recruit? So because this is what happens, and you have to sit down as a person when you want to hire somebody. You have to define that person. You have to define a time frame. So until when does this person have to start? Then you have to do the whole screening thing, invite candidates, select, and in the end hire them the position, hire the person for the position that you want to work with. And when reading job advertisements, it's very important to also try to clarify all those things that stand behind, and don't only look at the skills that are looking for. And then, especially for us scientists, it's sometimes not so easy to translate the skills that we do have into something else in different words, right? So we have, of course, all the scientific skills, but there's much more skills behind that, and you have to find a language where you can really say, okay, those are the skills I bring. So this is from communication skills, management and leadership skills. So at some point you really manage maybe a few people, or you trained students, so you very often do have this experience without even knowing it. And also the planning and research skills. So how do you create your strategies? So how do you do that? And of course, teamwork and interpersonal skills. So think about situations where you really learn that and where you show that, and as well as self-management. So how do you prioritize things? So how do you work under time pressure? And of course, it's the relevant work experience that counts for applying for positions. But so if you think about all these skills, the most important thing is actually that in the end, for a job application, you can give examples for that, so that you just don't say on your CV, I do have communication skills, or that you only write, I'm a great team worker. You somehow have to give examples, so in your CV, but as well as on your cover letter. And a good strategy to do that, a very good method, we think, is the STAR method. So that comes from storytelling. And actually, it's just an option to give structured examples, so to tell little success stories. So to briefly describe the situation, so who was involved, what was it, when, where, how, and then to say something about the task. And there it's very important that that you really put the focus on yourself. So what was your specific role in that task? So it's not about to describe a teamwork here, it's really about you as the person. So what's your contribution there? And then it's about action. So describe exactly how you did something. And in the end, you have to give a result. So to really have like some kind of measurable outcome. So this can, of course, in science, those might be publications. In industry settings, it could be time, it could be money, but it's also feedback, for example. So if you want to say something about your communication skills, you can, for example, think about a situation where you had to show those communication skills. So let's assume you're a biologist and you had to be part of a collaboration with a lot of IT people. And one of the tasks was to always be in touch with these IT people and to really translate here the different languages and to really be active and open and to paraphrase things and so on, and to really describe the situation very detailed, and also how you did that. For example, really trying to learn more technical terms to understand those people and so on, and then to bring a result, for example, to say, okay, that collaboration really worked out and ended with a great publication and so on. So this is a little structure to give examples. So if it comes to CVs, of course, there are all different kinds of CV formats, whether they are ordered chronologically, thematically, or combined, of a combination of both, actually. So to have chronologically and other parts based on skills. But important to know is actually the differences when applying for an academic setting and when applying for an industrial setting. Because in academic CVs, the focus is really on science and it's about publications and scientific ideas. So when you're applying for a postdoc position, that would look completely different when you're applying for a position in industry, because there it's more about experience and actually skills, and also the non-scientific skills, and more about the motivation. So, and it also differs with the length there. So even if you are the same person, your CV when applying for different kinds of positions always looks different. So you always have to tailor this to the audience, actually, so to the people going to recruit you. So I will do the next two slides kind of very, very quickly. So it's FAQs actually on CV writing. So many questions that always arise. So how long should a CV be? What should be included? What should I leave out? So, and this is some general rules that you have to have in mind. And it's good to follow them, but you can, of course, read a lot about that. But if you keep in mind that you have to understand the other side, actually, the recruiter side, so it's really good to think about, okay, what is important for them and what do I really have to put there, and how can I make this in a way that they can easily read that. So actually, it's really more about understanding the job advertisement and then to tailor your CV in a way that the information the recruiters are looking for can be easily found. And therefore, it's very good to get feedback. And the feedback doesn't have to come from a professional careers advisor. So the feedback can also come from your friends and your colleagues, because you can just try out and say, okay, this is the job I want to apply for. This is my CV. Hand them over your CV and take it back after a minute or so. So don't give them too much time, and just to ask, okay, what do you remember here? So what keeps you in mind? And it's just interesting to see how other people then perceive that and which questions arise for them. So. Of course, the sections to include in your CV, it needs your name, it needs your professional experience and your education. And so don't put too much effort in trying to name those sections, because actually the titles of the sections are very often ignored. So people don't care very much whether you call it professional experience or work experience. And so you don't have to worry too much about that. And the last thing, before I quickly say a few words to interview, is about cover letters. So there are different kinds of opinions on cover letters. So some recruiters also say cover letters are dead and you don't need cover letters anymore. The CV is just sufficient. But I personally am a big fan of cover letters, because that tells me so much more about the person. And this is really the place where you can bring in your personality, because CVs look very, very similar. So people come with different, with some very similar types of educational background, very similar skills if you want to apply for the same position. But a cover letter can really make the difference. So this is where you can really bring in your personality and show your motivation and also enthusiasm. So that's really the place where you can show all the different things that you can't show in your CV. And therefore, it's really useful to have one. Of course, that has to follow a certain format, and it has to really explain why you want to work for that institute or for that company, and but also the other way around. So why do they want you to work for them? So this is really, in the German term, Bewerbung actually says it's kind of self-marketing in a way. And so there is really the place where you convince people. And to also give these examples that I just introduced to you following the STAR method. So this is the place where you can really, really do that. And for the job interview, so of course, your goal for a job interview should really be that the people who are sitting there should perceive you as a competent and friendly future colleague. It's a good way, and it's a good situation where you can show your skills and your motivation by answering all the questions that come up. And also here, the STAR method is really helpful because you can think about questions beforehand. So you know your CV, you know your experience. You can think about the questions that might arise during the interview, and you can prepare that also very nicely with that method because you can always bring examples. So, and very often questions that are asked are also in the way of, can you describe a situation where you had to show something specific? Yeah, and in the very end, so prepare a job interview, of course, and but also follow up. So, and this is a question that very often comes to us, that people say, I applied for that position, they interviewed me, I said thank you after a short time, but I haven't heard from them. What can I do? So there's always the way of getting in touch again. So if there's some time that has been passed and that you agreed on, okay, they should have already got back to you, go there and call, ask for an update. And that's really something you should do, and don't be afraid of doing so, because hearing nothing back is always, that doesn't feel good, and it's not helpful. So you want to hear whether they already decided or not, and this is just good to get back. And sometimes that makes a difference also, because they realize, okay, we didn't think that the person gets back to us, but then maybe we invite her or him again, and that can really make a difference. So with that, I'm at the end. I want to say thank you. It was really nice, and if there are questions right now, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Let's see. Hello. Do you have a curiosity? Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you so much. That was a really wonderful talk.
Thank you.
We do have a few questions actually, but we're also a few minutes behind time. We have several questions, so maybe we'll ask just one or two from you here, and then the rest, if you could answer with the panel in the next session, that would be great, just so we don't we get back on track a little bit. So the first question we wanted to ask was that after, and this is coming from Dharma, after graduating, we look for a job, but there's often a question about 1 or 2 years of experience, which we don't have. How do we overcome this situation?
Okay, so very often this is something that you can just sell in a different way. So that question very often comes to us in saying, okay, I did my PhD right now, and now I want to apply for a position in industry, but they are looking for a person having at least 1 or 2 years of experience. And then you can say, okay, this is kind of an academic education, your PhD in a way. But on the other hand, this is already also a professional experience because you have work experience, you have worked during that time. And this is really just a thing where you say, okay, might be that they're looking for a person having experience of 1 or 2 years, but apply anyhow. So that's really the thing we recommend here.
Thank you. And for the next question we want to ask is actually, how do you improve social skills to improve your networking, especially if you're an introvert scientist, might not always be easy. So what are some recommendations?
So there's actually a very cool book. I have it here so I can show it. It's on my shelf and it says, I don't know whether you can see it. So it's networking for people who hate networking. And this is a really cool start to do that. And so it's different personalities, of course. And for example, going for a conference, some people might enjoy, so people who are extroverted, so they really gain energy from talking to people, and this is how they really feel very active. And more introverted people, for them, it's more stressful in a way in getting in touch with people, but you can really learn that. But it's important that you're aware of that fact of being introverted. That means that you actually gain energy and recover from maybe be on your own and maybe be in a calm environment, and therefore really to plan also breaks. So to do networking, but then also actively get out of that situation, go to the park next door or so, and really take the time to sit there on a bench and relax for a few minutes, and then you can really go back. So that's just a part of being aware what kind of personality you are and how to approach that. So it's always good just to give it a try, because actually there's nothing to lose. And that comes with the time when you realize, okay, nothing bad happens. And I will go on and proceed with that.
Thank you so much, Marion. So with that, maybe we invite you to hang around for a little bit if possible, and we will try to bring in our next panel of speakers for the next session. And our first academic session today will feature Dr. Nana Lee, who is an assistant professor at the University of Toronto and also is a personal mentor of mine. Actually, I think Nana and Marion, maybe you should exchange contacts, because I think you're both doing really important work for trainees in 2 different continents. So maybe it's good to basically
good idea. Yeah.
Nana, as well as Dr. Carlos Sanchez, who is a research fellow at Novartis here in Boston. And finally, Dr. Deepali Raval, who is a curriculum fellow for the Infectious Disease Consortium at Harvard Medical School, where she also did her PhD in microbiology. So I have actually enabled the microphone and video for all of you. If you're able to hover over to where you see the picture of Marion and the logo, you'll be able to enable your video and audio. So if you can do that, we can get started with the next session. Beautiful. I see Deepali. Hi, Deepali. Okay, wonderful. I see Nana.
Okay, so we're missing Carlos.
Carlos, are you able to join us? Okay, so maybe we can get started with Nana.